Hi, people. I'm sharing this particular video. The reason is that, of course, I couldn't find the recorded video during the weekend class where we had the last session on BCR discussion. So I couldn't find the video, the recording. So that is why I thought of sharing this alternative recording with you just after discussion of this particular paper. Right, I'll go through, quickly go through this case study and the paper, of course. What can I do is, since the recording is not there, so that I will share this document with you all via the mail, right? So you can refer this recording with the paper, and you can prepare yourself for the examination. It is not said that these questions are coming to exactly the examination, but still some sort of what do you call, the similar types of questions will be asked. Right. In business contractual relationship, the first paper, which covers on the consumer affairs, consumer sale, consumer rights, protectionism, as well as credit tax. Right. So when it comes to the first case, you can see that in your PDF mock paper discussions, you can see that Paul Bernard is a tourist who is giving a friend, who is having a friend in Miami called Joseph. Paul informed that he will visit for his holiday season, and as it is the winter, Joseph decided to buy uh, a heater, room heater, which is cost around 340 GBP. After 2 weeks' time, his friend visited, and while the heater was turned on due to overwarming, it caught fire. Then it damaged the whole room, and due to the smoke inhalation, Paul was admitted to the hospital. Joseph, complaining, this visited to the shop and he bought the heater, and seller of the product was reluctant to accept the fault and mentioned that Joseph has agreed to bear the responsibility of the loss of the damage, whichever he or any party experience, which is caused by any reason. Right? So this is a case study which is given, and that asks to give a sort of a an idea about what the consumer sale is, right? So basically, when it comes to a consumer sale, it's basically, when it comes to business management or administration, you can say just it's all about selling a product to another, right? But when it comes to contractual relationship, it's basically the sale is what happens there. It's that it's all about, transferring the title of a good, or maybe let's uh, say that it's all about transferring the property ownership or the title uh, from the seller to its buyer at a consideration. So this is the precise answer that you can give, right? So that must contain the terms like the buyer and the seller, consideration, as well as the transfer of title, right? These things to be included in the answer. Second one, name any implied terms in sales agreement and point out any implied terms relevant. Now, when it comes to sales agreement, right, it doesn't say anything about, what the express terms and what the implied terms are, right? So when it comes to implied terms, there's no one is going to say that, okay, this particular title was received by, that was with the seller, and later on only it transfers to the buyer, right? No one is going to say like that. So that we can say, uh, of course, there are some implied terms as to the title, as to the fitness of the product, as to the quality, as to the usability, right? So these are some of the implied terms where you can find them out through our presentations, that is on Sales of Goods Act, as well as the presentation which covers the Consumer Rights Act. Of course, you can find all these things from your the last presentation, that is on consumer protectionism as well. So other than that, you have, when it comes to law of sale of goods, you can find out all these implied terms where we discussed about implied and express terms, implied conditions, express conditions, warranties, everything, right? In that particular lesson, you can find out what are the implied terms are, which are not expressly mentioned in a sales agreement, but those are implied. Third one, what are the legal remedies possible that is available to Paul and Joseph separately? So it is, that when it comes to Paul and Joseph, these are two personalities, and Paul is basically the person who visited from abroad, let's say, and Joseph is the person who actually bought this particular room heater. So, there are two things, right? When it comes to Consumer Protection Act, and as well as when it comes to Consumers Right Act, right? Right Act of 2015. That consumer, in the sense like it can be anyone. It doesn't matter whether the person who's suffering from injuries or maybe who's experienced the loss or the damages is the person who exactly bought that particular thing, right? It doesn't matter. But when it comes to uh, Consumer Protection Act, right, you can say the person who suffers the injuries or the losses or the damages should be uh, compensated through whatever the provisions made by. You will have to particularly refer to the provision which is made by the Consumer Protection Act, right? Then you will have to say, okay, these are the possibilities available to this particular person under the provisions of the Consumers Protection Act of 19, this one, right? So then after, when it comes to Joseph, it's the person who actually bought the particular heater. So you can say this being the consumer as well as the person who bought this particular thing from the shop. Joseph is having the right to sue against the seller of this particular product. If that was happened, let's say if that has happened under the general circumstances, I was always telling you that it's to be happening. Like if you use this particular heater for some other purpose, right? It has to be used to prove that okay, there was a damage or a loss which has occurred was due to the general or maybe the normal use of the particular product. uh, so that is the thing that you will have to prove in your case, right? Otherwise, there are no evidences to prove that you have been using this particular product for the general purpose that it is made for, right? So it's basically the complaint is going to be void, right? You don't have the evidences. Now, as an example, let's say that I was explaining you, when I was explaining this example to you, I was taking some of the examples like if a person uses iron, right? I told you, right? Most of the five-star hotels, even the Indians are coming. So Indians are used to, use this particular, the irons which are kept in the rooms to prepare pugi and chapati, right? I told you. So in that case, of course, if something goes wrong, so that there's no way of claiming those because the particular product was made like for the purpose of ironing the clothes, right? So that is that. So you must give clear, uh, what do you call? You must express your clear idea about the Consumer Protection Act as well as the Consumers Right Act, whatever the provisions made by those two acts on the consumer as well as the purchaser, or maybe let's call them as a buyer particularly, right? So that is the answer for third question. And what do you think about the disclaimer on the possibility of evade the liability? If you are a person who knows about the product liability, which covers under the Sales of Good Act as well as there are different definitions given by different acts, right? So you can refer all the presentations pertaining to this. And we've discussed about the product liability, right? No one can evade the product liability, even though there's an agreement, even though there are terms agreed, right? According to the provisions, there's a particular act, you will have to find it out, right? Those that is given, of course. You don't want to Google it and see. That is given. So you will have to go there and you will have to ensure that okay, this is the act, right? Uh, when it comes to the legal liability, or let's call it as the product liability, no one say that no seller can evade any liability on the particular product, right? Saying that okay, one has agreed with an agreement, or maybe one has initially, he disclaimed, saying that, right? No one can include disclaimer, so that comes under the product liability. So that is the answer for fourth question. And then after the next case, Peter reserved a bungalow in St. Mary, and the reservation was made back in June, and now in March the next year, he came to know that the bungalow is about to declare as an insolvent, right? So insolvent in the sense you know that, right? Okay, with the situation, and now he's in doubt of whether he will lose the money he paid. So basically, in this case, I asked you to assume that this transaction was being, the transaction has been made through a credit card, right? Because mostly when we do reservations, right, other than whenever you do, especially whenever you even do online bookings as well, right? You're used to use your credit cards and do bookings, right? So when it comes to that particular reservation, so we can say the person was making this reservation through a credit card, right? If that is not given, of course, you can assume in a different way. But say now, here I'm thinking of getting the sense of the credit cards, right? Credit transactions. So that has to be covered under the Consumers Credit Act, if you can remember, right? There were so many provisions made on that, right? We discussed in the class as well, especially the Consumer Credit Legislation of 1974. And what it asks is that you being the legal officer of Peter, consult him whether there's a legal possibility, a remedy potential, right? Yes. So if you look at here, you have a bungalow in St. Mary, basically, let's say the accommodation, and the person called Peter, he is the person to put this particular, make this reservation. And also, let's assume that this was done through a credit card and the credit card company is there. So there are three involvements, if you can see. So basically, we call the person who's going to apply for credit, that is Peter, as the debtor. And the credit facilitation is going to be happen through the creditor. And then after it's almost done, right? It's almost done. So you can say that there's a creditor as well. And when it comes to the bungalow in St. Mary, we can say that it's a service provider. So if you look at, there are three particular parties: debtor, creditor, and supplier, right? So in this case, we can justify this particular incident is actually an agreement between debtor, creditor, and supplier agreement, right? So it's between them three. So whatever the provisions which are made, okay, if you can see specifically under the consumer credit legislation, it says that if there's any certain incident like that, just after you made the payment, you come to know that, okay, this organization is no more, right? So in that case, you may have applied for some credits, right? You may have not consumed the service, but you may have, probably paid the amount, right? In that case, of course, either you can sue against the supplier, saying that to refund the particular credit facility. Otherwise, you will have to pay a lot, right? So that is one thing. Or else you can ask the credit facilitator, right? You can go for suing against the credit facilitator if they are going to charge on you, right? Say that without having a service, it is not recommended, because you know that consumer credit legislation is there to protect the creditors, protect the debtors, right? The data protection is a key of having a consumer credit legislation. So according to the 1974 provisions, you can say if even if you have paid the amount through a credit facility, but if you have not experienced any of the services, or maybe if you have not received any of the utility, so you can sue against the particular person, like the creditor or maybe the supplier, uh, for their responsibilities to not to recover the sums from you, right? So that has to be explained according to the consumer credit legislation's provisions of 1974, right? You better look at the lesson and come to the examination. Right. Then I'm moving to the second case study, the second major case study, right? So North American Power Company PLC has 3,800 employees. The company directly controls the operations of Hoover Dam. The power complex of Hoover Dam is having 7 engineers into mechanical, electrical, maintenance, and structural. All its engineers are provided with NPC uniforms. Then recently, they recruited Dave as the maintenance engineer, but he is not provided with NPC uniforms. And has no any formal hours time frame of work except 15 hours a week, right? That has the minimal number of hours. Also, he was given with a chance the freedom to accept or refuse work assigned by the NPC, and has a capacity to deploy one of his batchmates at the time. So this thing is not going to happen practically, but I just wanted to imply one of the things. So that is why I just, that is to precisely explain about the working nature, or maybe the type of the contract that he's having. Only I've just gave this, right? On one of his batch mates at the times, which he will not be able to perform his work, right? So in that case, you can clearly understand what type of a contract is there between the NPC and Dev, right? What type of a contract does exist between? Now, if you look at through these small hints which are given here, right? Dev as a maintenance engineer, but he's not provided with NPC uniforms. Now, uniforms are not provided, right? It doesn't matter. And he doesn't have exact number of formal hours of work. He can come whenever he wants, but still he has to complete a minimum of 15 hours a week. And then after, if you look at, uh, he has the freedom to accept or to refuse the work assigned by the NPC. So basically, you can assume it's a matter of when it comes to his capacity. If he's an employee, let's say if there's an agency between, let's say NPC being the principal, if the dev is going to be the agent, if they're having an agency, you can't expect. It's basically an employment, so that you can't expect this much of a nature to be happen, right? So this has to be definitely a contract for service, right, between dev and NPC, where Dev is basically an external consultant, right? Let's call him as an independent consultant in this case, right? So you know what the type of the contract this exists. So you will have to explain me the points, right? Do not, when it comes to your real case study, which will come to your examination, right? It won't ask you what is the type of the contract, but if there's any question as such, so you will have to explain it in a very deeper way, where by getting the sense of the the characteristics that you can see, right? And with that, you will have to justify the nature of the employment, right? And then when it comes to the next question, it asks list any situations which a dismissal can be considered as fair or unfair. So best thing is that you go through the employee discrimination, employee termination, um, and dismissals, what we discussed under the law of employment. So there you have fair and unfair dismissals, right? What are they have there? Like in my presentation, I have listed what are the fair and unfair dismissal according to the acts, right? So you will have to approach to the question by explaining the act and the provisions, like basically what have they said, like what have they said in the act, right? Uh, Explaining what are the circumstances of fair and unfair dismissals. Then after they ask, what do you think about fairness of? Okay, now when it comes to, of course, I missed that particular part, right? That is why I just kept it here. I just wanted to say that okay, one of the employees from this NPC has been fired due to his, let's say, mechanical engineer, right? There was a person who was actually uh, not having the qualifications to run the show, like basically say that it's not a mechanical engineer, but since because of the person's capacity, they kept him as in a capacity of, uh, you know, uh, let's say maintenance supervision. So it's not a maintenance engineer, right? Let's think about, like, let's think in that way, right? It's not a maintenance engineer, but they kept, the NPC has kept him as the maintenance supervisor or chief of maintenance. But later on, since the person does not have the educational qualifications, they ask him to leave, right? So what do you think about this? When it comes to Employment Right Act, ERA, you can say it is fair, right? By the case, it's fair because the reason is that uh, if a person does not have, if a person does not have a sufficient qualification, or maybe education, lack of qualifications, or maybe statutory wrong, let's say if a driver does not have a license, maybe he cannot perform the job. So in that case, it is fair enough to ask the person to leave the organization. But then again, you have a sort of a moral, ethical concern when it comes to the appointment of such a person as the chief of maintenance. If there's such a case, right, you will have to explain that as well. Then after, what are the characteristics of employees which are protected by the discrimination law? So I have already given you the about the discrimination law. So you will have to refer that and come. And specifically whatever the specific characteristics, say that ethnicity, gender, sex, race, masculinity versus femininity, right? All these things will be covered through the discrimination, right? If I say, when it comes to, I see that even now also I see that when it comes to Sri Lanka, if you look at the advertisements which are kept in, which are posted in some of the websites, I see that even there are some terms called preferably a male should be the candidate, right? Ideally, a male candidate would be preferred like that. There's a discrimination happens. But if you are going to like, I will share my personal experience as well. Whenever you post some of your advertisements, especially through Facebook or maybe LinkedIn, so they are really it's sort of, it's not a matter of that you are posting your advertisements at a charge, but still, um, of course, by paying you can get the premium ads. But then again, I'm telling you, whenever you fill these fields, right, there are some ATSs given in the systems to detect whether the discrimination happens, that automatically rejects your uh, publication. So basically they say that just because of this discrimination rule, we are not in a position to publish your ad, and saying that they will basically reject your advertisement until you edit it, right? If you are going to edit that particular part only, they are going to accept that advertisement and they are going to publish in their website. So under any sort of a discrimination, they are not going to publish them in their websites. Okay. Uh, I just wanted to share some practical example with you. Okay. So then after, so that is what, right? The law is that sort of, strict now. So that's why they are, sticking to all these laws only. The site owners are maintaining their websites as well. So that is why I just wanted to tell you that is not having any sort of, what do you call, that is relevant for your content. But then again, I just wanted to share. Right. So then after fifth one, if you look at this statement, you are not permitted to enter these premises since you are Sri Lankan. So this is basically a directly, discrimination has been done directly, so that you can call this one as a direct discrimination. So it asks you which sort of a discrimination is the above. So you can say that, okay, this is basically a direct discrimination, right? And then they're asking to you to differentiate between the direct and the indirect discriminations. Yeah. So basically, you can refer the discrimination uh, uh, particular part of your presentation, uh, especially with reference to the Equality Act, right? And discriminative practices, right? You have to know what are the direct and indirect discriminations are, right? So if this question comes to your examination, I prefer you all to give the answer with an example, right? So that is one thing. And when it comes to the third major case study, Tom is an elevator technician who worked for Racer LLC, and they received the complaint from Infinity Towers, which is a condominium which is located in the city, saying that the staff can hear a noise inside the elevator shaft. Jason, the MD of Racer LLC, wanted Tom to be attended as he's the most competent technician of the company. Tom visited the building, entered to the shaft. While he was observing, he noticed that due to the slippery surface on the guide rail. Therefore, he serviced the guide rail and the elevator and ensured the safety. And he took 3 rides, and even visited the machine room and checked on the functioning of the governor rope and ensured its functionality. Since he applied for a short leave, just after the completion of work, he went home. While he was resting at home, from the television, he saw that elevator he repaired has free fallen with a guest inside in it and has been hospitalized. The guest has been hospitalized, and you can't hospitalize the elevator, no? Right. So then Tom suddenly visited and explained what he has done to his managing director, Jason. By looking at all these matters, Tom has done and acted by doing everything that could be expected of a reasonably prudent person, or maybe reasonably competent mechanic, right? So they're asking what are the general principles of Felix. So better you go to the okay, I will share that particular lesson with you, right? Even though we have covered that in the business law class, right? I just wanted to make a sense here. So I took that particular part here. So let me share the presentation with you in the Moodle, right? You can refer that. There's nothing, there's no any big deal. to you to refer the material, right? Because you already know that. And they ask what are the general principles of delicts. So if you look at, there are major, right? Culpa, damnum injuria datum, right? So all these are included as the general principles of delicts in your presentation. So you just go through the presentation and see, right? Reasonableness, right? So everything comes under that. Okay. So you just want to explain about the general principles of delicts and advise both Tom and the Race LLC for any potential legal consequences. Now, if you look at between the particular person called Tom, the technician, as well as the say that it's Tom and the company are having an agency. So basically, they're having a employee-employer relationship. So in that case, the employer becomes liable under the vicarious liability that I've told you, right? Vicarious and several liabilities, right? Whatever the things which are done by the agent, finally the employer becomes liable. Okay. So whatever the legal consequences possible. Now, when it comes to the Tom's case, Tom becomes personally liable in some circumstances, right? Because he was the person to perform this elevator service, right? He becomes personally liable, but whatsoever he has done was correct, and because this is the act where you can, it's basically say that it's basically the whatever the necessary precautions to be taken that have been already been made by the by this particular technician called Tom, right? And the liability which comes under the JSON, or maybe let's say the not the JSON personally, but RISE LLC, is that employer becomes finally liable for whatever the acts which are made by the agent, right? So under that sense, you can say that okay, finally the company is also becoming liable as a result of they having an agency, right? The third one is that consult JSON on any potential defenses in any event if anybody sued for negligence, right? Now, when it comes to this, of course, you have a point to say, okay, this person was not negligent, even though the person was, no, someone can say, okay, this person was having a hurry to leave early since he has applied for short leave. The person would have completed the work, in a half a way and went. But here you have some of the evidences to prove in your case study, that is the second para, you have to say that he was checking on the guide rails, he was checking on the lift brakes, as well as he was checking on the governor rope, and even he took 3 rides inside the elevator, right? So that is to ensure the safety, right? And just after the explanation, it is found that, just after this, all these accident happened, right? With respect of the Tom's statements, which he was giving to the Jason, right? There are sufficient evidences to prove that Tom has done and acted by doing everything that could be expected of a reasonably competent mechanic. So if you look at even the reasonably prudent person test, you can say the person would have, acted in a reasonably prudent way so that there's no negligence. So if you look at the remedies which are possible for these negligent misstatements, or maybe especially the delicts, right? You know that voluntary non-fit injuria, novus actus interveniens, right? There are so many remedies available. So you just go through the slides and see, right? Those are given. And when it comes to the third assessment, of course, you have the time, right? So you can refer these on. If you have any concern, of course, you can let me know to do an extra session for y'all if it is needed, right? Just after completion of this particular, all the other things, right? Because we have the examination that is to be happen by tomorrow, the first examination, right? We have already covered the parts for all these 3 examinations, right? But on 28th, you have the second and the third examinations, right? What I prefer is you to, go through. And if you have any concerns regarding the second and the third assessments, of course, you have another 1 week of a time. So you can just give me a buzz to do a session if you want. I can do it for you, right? So just have a free time. And then after, just let me know by having a chat with your colleagues. Just let me know so I can make my schedules free to do an extra session if you need, right? But I don't think that you need an extra session because we have already covered all these aspects, right? Not to worry, right? You will have to thoroughly go through, and of course, I will have to say this: this is going to be definitely an open book examination, right? So you don't want to worry about, right? All these three are going to be open book examinations, so you can refer your materials and okay. Uh, so those are from my end. If you have any concerns, please contact me via my mobile or maybe my email. I, I would like to help you all because you are a wonderful batch anyway. So that let me know. I can assist you. Thank you, people. Hope that you will uh, share these videos with the others as well. Right, just pass the message. I will also send a message to you all saying that okay, I will send you an email to you all by referring to this particular recording, which is available in the Microsoft Teams, right? So you can download it and see. Okay. I wish you all the very best for your examinations and okay, be safe. Thank you.